What's good, peeps? Time for another Magic Man review. Oh, it's been a while since I did a review. I had to take a little time off from that organized crime stuff I got into last time. Man, it's depressing. It really is depressing, I tell you. The stuff that people do. But some of y'all might know, might be new to the channel. My whole premise when I'm reading these books is that humans are going to human. They really don't change all that much. And to show how that's always kind of been the case, maybe not always, but for what we know of history, humans are going to human. They've been doing the same stuff since back in the day. So today's book is Classical Greece by Robin Osborne. All right. Now, I got this book from the library, a little short of funds. I was like, well, let's go to the used book aisle and see if we can find some stuff. Normally, I wouldn't have got this book, but there wasn't much to read. There wasn't, You go to the library, you find stuff like, baby care, home cooking, how to do your taxes, crap like that, Like, I don't want to read that stuff. It's not interesting to me. And so I was like, well, let's go back, back in time, go over the Greeks again. Because I already knew a whole bunch of stuff about Greece. And most of the majority of the stuff in this book was kind of like a refresher course for me. I already knew this stuff. But there were some interesting little tidbits in here, Sometimes it helps if, when you go researching a subject, to read 4 or 5 different books about that subject. And because not everybody's going to cover the same thing, and you'll really get a good broad knowledge of the subject you're trying to review. All right. One of the things that really stuck out to me in this book is how some of the classical philosophers were really full of crap. Right? Like Plato. Plato was really probably the world's first fascist. He was a utopian guy. We're going to live in this perfect society, and some of these Greek kings and Greek legislatures, they put some of these philosophical thoughts into their legislature, and they tried to rule like it, and it just ended in disaster. I think in Sicily, it led to a revolt, and the king had to kill a whole bunch of people. So these guys, it looks good on paper, like most stuff, like communism. Looks good on paper. Doesn't really work out in the end. Capitalism looks good on paper, Some stuff ain't too good about it, But most systems are a mixed bag, and most systems are kind of they're kind of fascistic to begin with. You got your oligarchy and you got your helots down here, and then you got your hoplites coming out there and enforce all the laws. You didn't pay your taxes, I'm gonna stab you to death. So anyway, and one of the things that got me about these philosophers and these noblemen and stuff, these guys, they lived a life of luxury because they had slaves doing all their work, and so they thought they were the bee's knees. They thought they were the greatest things in sliced bread. And it reminded me really of what Thomas Sowell was getting about when he talked about the anointed class. It's like, well, who anointed these people? They're self-anointed. It's like, oh, my shit doesn't stink, so I'm going to tell you what to do. Because I've got money, and I can pay the police, and I can pay the soldiers and if you don't do what I say, I'm going to come and mess you up real bad, So, yeah, it's crazy. I didn't know the Greek letters came from Phoenician. I thought that, well, they came from Phoenician letters. So things kind of get recycled, like Russian letters. The Russian alphabet is Greek. It's Greek letters and Greek words kind of translated into Slavic, and if that makes any sense to you. But you learn a lot of little interesting tidbits, and if anything, I've become a wealth of useless information. But hey, it's all good. One of the things that really stuck out to me, and it's like rang true, is like ding 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 ding, is when Aristotle was cool sometimes, and he's like, you're going about this stuff all wrong. All you philosophers with your utopian bullshit, you're not really, that's not practical. That's not how the real world works. Because if you want to know a good philosophy and stuff, you got to do stuff that's practical. You got to be pragmatic sometimes. You just can't, just gaze at your navel, smell your own farts. Because the real world is like, it doesn't, the real world works on force, okay? And the will to use it. That's what it really boils down to, okay? All this little lofty crap, blah, 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 this and that. And so anyway, Aristotle said, if you want to understand, if you want to stand philosophy, if you want to get a good philosophical grip on how you should rule your society, look to the past and study history, and you'll understand human nature and all the things that go wrong with humans. And all learn from people's past mistakes, learn what they got right, and learn what they got wrong, and see if it applies to your system. Okay, see if you can work something out that's good for you. And I was like, you know what? It's true. It's one of the reasons I love history books and I do these reviews. It's because if you really want to understand the world, you got to study history. Because people have been doing the same stuff over and over and over again. The only true thing about history is people don't learn anything from history. They do the same stuff over and over again. It's frustrating sometimes, but people are what they are, so you can't really have high hopes for most people. I didn't know that Macedon had been defeated by the Persians at one point. I thought like Macedon and Philip and Alexander were, the best conquerors the world's ever known. But before they had built up their society, they had actually been conquered by the Persians at once. Didn't know that. All right. Some of the stuff a lot of the ancient Greek history is known about. When people think about the Greeks, they think about, the Trojan Wars, Trojan soldiers, and they think about philosophers. And when you read some of the stuff in here about what they were doing and they advocated, it reminds me of like a quote from Napoleon. Napoleon says, "I don't argue with intellectuals. I just shoot them." All right? It's like, people are worthless, Go out and do some real work. All right. Let's see. All right. If you don't know this, hopefully I'm getting it right. I'm kind of going from memory, but when you're talking about the Greek world, Macedonians weren't kind of really considered Greek by the other Greek city-states, and the other Greek city-states thought of themselves as foreign, even though they spoke the same language. They were really provisional, and it's hard to grasp that now with our modern concepts of nation states and things like that. We don't think of stuff like being provisional, but it's true. Like somebody from the mountains of Pennsylvania is totally different from the shores of Cocoa Beach in Florida, right? They got different mindsets. Or from Texas and New York, upstate New York, from the city, New York City, Long Island. Total different mentality sometimes. They even speak differently. So it's kind of the same thing when you're talking about the ancient Greek city-states. But the Macedonians weren't really, they didn't consider them Greek, even though they're kind of Greek-ish. Some of this is going from my own memory, that they had to get the Oracle of Delphi to pronounce them real Greeks so they can participate in the Olympian Games. Because it's like, you're not real Greeks. They considered them barbarians because the Greeks, they were kind of snobbish. They were. I would say the Macedonians were kind of like the hillbillies of their day. They lived up in the mountains. The Greeks would water down their wine. Sip and talk about philosophy. And the Macedonians get rip-roaring drunk. But they eventually got conquered by the Macedonians, and then united all of Greece. And then the Macedonians just went on a rip, conquered the Persians, conquered most of the world. I didn't know Kandahar in Afghanistan was named after Alexander. That's actually a derivative of the name Alexander. I knew that. Some of this stuff is going from memory because I've studied this stuff in the past. But you get a really good rehearsal, not a rehearsal, but a good review of some of the stuff, if you've studied Greek before. And most of this book was talking about the Hellenic world. And the Hellenic world is the Greek city-states before Alexander. Okay, when Alexander conquered them all, it became the Hellenistic world, or Hellenist world. So that's the dividing line, kind of like when Rome took over. You went from Greek being one of the main languages of the Enlightened to going into Latin. All right, and some really good stuff in here. It was a short book, fun little read, trying to get away from the organized crime. But when you look at some of the stuff, the way these guys behaved, it's so different. They're just crime syndicates. You could put on a robe and a little fancy little, thing in your hair. You can shave. Oh, you're not a barbarian because you shave. Those people over there, in the mire, in the dirt, they're barbarians, because they don't sip their wine. They bucket. People are people. It's really fun stuff sometimes when you read it, and you'll really get a good grasp on how humans interact with each other. Another thing about it's stressed in this book. Some of the other books got away from it. You kind of get in there a little bit. Some of the things which are that are portrayed, how the Greeks and the Romans are portrayed, is like they're raving lunatic homosexuals. They're just going at it like spring rabbits. It wasn't really like that. Even in the book, it was much more personal back then. People would go around asking you, if you were AC/DC. It was a little, little more accepted than it is today. Like with our society, the Western world, and the modern world, kind of frowning upon, what's it called, pedestry or something like that. When a young man, an older guy, grooms a younger guy in like a lodge, like the Spartans did. So they would be lovers, like the Thebians. They would be lovers, and they would fight even more on the battlefield. That's why Alexander was like, he was one of the main dudes, because I guess he had all these lovers fighting for him. They didn't want to see him killed, But it was in the ancient world, and it still exists to some extent in, I guess, like in the Middle East and like in Afghanistan, places like that. Like young boys were for pleasure and women were for children. Okay. And when I read this book, I was like, man, these guys, everybody's got their thing, I don't, discriminate. That's your thing, rock on with yourself, But I was reading like the Plato and some of the philosophers like, this is really bad behavior. We need to discourage this stuff, And the same thing with the Romans. I learned that too, that most Romans were very conservative. You think of them, worshiping Zeus and stuff like that, or Kronos or Saturn, whatever the names of their gods is. Those were gods they got from the Greeks. They adopted those gods. Most of their gods, and same thing with the Greeks, were like household gods. Like their doorway was a god. And, when you're bringing your newlywed wife to your household to bring with your new family, you have to introduce your wife to the doorway god, So they were very conservative. Usually that kind of behavior, AC/DC was kind of like for the rich people, the anointed class. But it existed, it's been around since the dawn of time. But if you look at things today, everybody's, going at it all the time, and that's all they do. That's all they think about. And I've met people like that. They're like, I don't care that, I had two lesbians that were my neighbors one time, and all they could talk about is like, their sexuality. I'm like, don't you have anything else going for you? What kind of like, business adventures you got? What have you read lately? Have you invented anything? No, I just want to sit around all day, rip bong hits, and talk about being gay. Great, I got more interesting things to talk about than sexuality. But I'm going on a sexuality rant. But see, the thing is, they didn't really emphasize it as much in the ancient Greek world. And in the Roman world, too. So, you got, like, the stuff that's on television, I didn't watch it. Like, was it Spartacus? There's a lot of that stuff in there. I didn't watch it. It's implied. I know it's on the television these days. You just can't get away from stuff. They always have to push stuff. It's like in the 80s. All the movies in the 80s had the mandatory sex scene, the high-speed chase, and the never-ending magazine. You just put that magazine, it never runs out. You can shoot up a whole army, and that magazine they never changed it, right? Those were the three staples in the 80s movies. Nowadays, it's like, you got to talk about, your feelings and stuff like that. Whatever. I don't watch it. That's why I read books. Way more interesting. All right. I've gone on a long enough tangent. It was an interesting little book. Can't really say anything bad about it. I mean, it's history. It is what it is. Alright? Classical Greece by Osborne. Until next time, peeps. Oh, yeah. I've been forgetting this. I got some new people coming in, checking out my videos. If you like this video, like and subscribe. And if you don't like it, well, just piss off then.